The dog and I are up here in North Hobart. North Hobart is the name of the suburb directly first north of the Hobart CBD, also bordering the domain West Hobart, Mount Stewart and Newtown. About 2,500 people live in it, but because of the geography of this city, almost everybody visits, or at the very least, finds themselves driving through. An 1832 map of Hobart Town shows the capital as a place of open farmlands and a few emerging roads. At the time, about half of what we now call North Hobart was considered to be part of Newtown. The dog and I are down here on the corner of Ryde and Argyle. We're here because of this rock in the ground. Boundary stone, Hobart Town, 1857. It was the northernmost point of old Hobart Town. There's another stone up on Elphinston Road and there's another one that way on the Brooker. And this was the northernmost point of old Hobart Town. The fact that the markers no longer apply because North Hobart extends much further up that way, it shows how arbitrary and plastic these lines all are. An 1844 painting by John Skinner Prout depicts North Hobart, with today's Commercial Road to the left and today's Elizabeth Street to the right. In the centre of the image is a woman, seated with child. She would be unable to explain what the future might become. That location today is unrecognisable. Before the apartment building was erected, there used to be a service station, and in the sky there was a trailer. It was the first thing you'd see on the cusp of the hill. Elizabeth Street has been the main street in Hobart for a long time, so it makes sense that transportation devices be edified upon it. Further down, a car yard does the same with a Mini Cooper. Before the sign was painted, there was an actual car mounted above. The second tram line in Hobart ran up Elizabeth Street, stopping often in North Hobart. And the first fatal accident involving a tram occurred in North Hobart too. In 1894, at the Federal Street intersection, an elderly farmer named Thomas Anderson was returning home to Bismarck, now called Collinsvale, when his horse, sharing the road, became spooked by the tram, throwing him into its path, where he was run over. The last fatal accident involving a tram occurred at the other end of North Hobart in 1960. A lorry truck struck a tram at the intersection of Elizabeth and Warwick, cutting the tram's brake cables. As the tram rolled backwards, conductor Raymond Donahue protected passengers with orders to shelter at the front while he applied emergency brakes. Crashing into a stationary tram further down the hill, only Donahue's life was taken. Elizabeth College, established in 1911, is a jigsaw of mismatched buildings that don't quite fit together. The public facility takes Year 11 and 12 students. A full-time workload is expected of all students in Tasmania until the age of 18 or the completion of Year 12. To date, that goal is more of an idea than a material reality. I went to Elizabeth College. When I was here, this skate park wasn't here. It was a sort of a miniature AFL field. And up along there are a series of totem poles. I think they've been put there by the arts students. At the same time, I used to work at Burger King, now Hungry Jack's. There was a woman that worked there and she had a boyfriend, a partner, who was the victim of extremely disorderly thinking. One night, after watching a movie that had come out, he decided that there was a glitch in the Matrix. And this caused him to do a whole bunch of erratic stuff. She came home one night and all the drawers were open, All the doors were open, all the windows were open, and he wasn't there. So she went out looking for him. She was calling out his name, she couldn't find him. She lived up the hill, she just went down the hill because gravity took her that way, I guess. She came down here and the totem poles were here. He had all his clothes with him, he'd pulled them out of the closet and he was dressing the totem poles in his clothes. And he told her that he felt that he could communicate with the gods. In class opposition to Elizabeth College at the bottom of North Hobart is at the top, Paris end of North Hobart, the Friends School. Its current grounds are built on the ruins of the Boa Vista Mansion and the repurposed Hobartville Mansion. The iconic North Hobart Post Office was built in 1913, designed by John Smith Murdoch, the same bloke who built Old Parliament House in Canberra. A very fine one-storey Edwardian of brick and stucco, the central entrance has steps of a faintly Romanesque quality. Across the road is the State Cinema. Once upon a time, there were lots of cinemas in Hobart. The only old one still running is the State. Built just before World War I in 1913, it stands today as a thriving business. It would have been lost, however, if not for Gough Whitlam in the 1970s taking a shine to it, when it was purchased by the government-funded Australian Film Institute. North Hobart is filled with many things that are no more. Petrol stations, now car yards, and cafes. On many of the corners, there are spots that used to be shops. Many of the pubs are gone or transformed. The Wagon and Horses, now the Wagon. The Rose and Crown became the Empire Hotel, became the Republic Bar. The Winston used to be called, among other things, the Eagle Hawk Inn. Bricklayers Arms became Sir William Don Hotel, and now is a nondescript office. The Lime Kiln Inn is the Crescent Hotel, one of the finest slices of heritage in the area. The once grand Sir Thomas Brisbane Hotel now has a door, but no balcony. Queen's Head Hotel is on Newdigate Street. Newdigate Street used to be called Queen Street, and the pub at the head of Queen Street is the pub now called the Queen's Head. The former Dallas Arms Inn is one of the oldest buildings in North Hobart. Operation began around 1828. It is a structure put together in stages of unknown interval. It has not served a drink since 1918. Behind the now private residence is a boat. The full moon remains as dry as the once watering hole it now occupies. Another door to nowhere, the 1882 small mansion, became a private hospital in 1915 and ran until the late 1940s. North Hobart has architecture built on the remains of old, and there are buildings that look condemned but are not. But there is something even stranger about North Hobart. North Hobart was, in fact, a more fully suburban area of homes at the end of World War II, when a decision was made to reverse gentrification. The Hobart City Council, in an effort to restart the local economy, encouraged industry to move back in, knocking down a lot of cottages. Many of the ones that were left found themselves Frankensteined, with factories bolted on the back. And places like the Bodyworks, homes reduced to storage sheds for scrap car parts, a junkyard on a super valuable piece of real estate. The map shows a rivulet that is mostly hidden now. Providence Valley is still a real place, but the name is barely mentioned. Beginning now in West Hobart and Mount Stewart, it was home to the source of the Providence rivulet. The water ran in the open through North Hobart, energising industries and irrigating crops. Part of the rivulet can still be visited in the block between Elizabeth and Argyle Street. We're here in Soundy Park, and this is a spot where there used to be a big tree. It's merely a stump now. The dog's still sort of enjoying it all. This area used to be a tannery. The rivulet used to flow through here, and they used to take water from that source and use it for their procedures. When that shut down, it eventually became a timber yard, and there was a big timber yard here right through the 70s. By the late 80s, it was just a sort of abandoned wasteland. And then by the 1990s, it was turned into a park, and that's what it is now. You can bring your dog here, you can push a pram, your kids can play on the play equipment. One day though, this will be something different again. The water passes on through towards the old quadrant area and now goes into giant pipes under the Brooker Highway before spilling out into the Derwent. Campbell Street Primary opened in 1926 and it replaced the old Central School which had been operating in the now CBD, originally built in part to train student teachers, hence the words practicing school. So this part of town used to be called the Quadrant. We're here, Campbell Street Primary School. It used to be the Campbell Street Cemetery. It was a massive cemetery. Thousands of bodies are buried underneath this field where kids play these days. The Providence rivulet sort of runs down that way. Over time, the rivulet, like all waterways, moved. It's been formalised into pipes now, and that's where it still runs. One of the reasons that they had to do this was because we're in a situation where there'd be heavy rain, storms would come through, and it was starting to displace some of the skeletons that were in the ground. The funeral home here is familiar to a lot of people in Hobart because, like me, at some point in time, you've probably attended a service for a beloved departed. When the building was put up in 1916, it was actually a school. It's closed now, and that's emblematic of Tasmania generally. You've got a dead situation where you should have something bringing life up. For some reason, there's not a co-ed public high school anywhere near the Hobart CBD. Tasmania as a whole has the lowest literacy rates in the whole country, and it has the lowest rate of Year 12 completion. It's a massive problem. Because Tasmanians, for a large part, don't finish Year 12, they're unable to go out and get good jobs. And you don't just want a good job for yourself, you want the people around you to have good jobs because you rely on each other. At the moment in Tasmania, there aren't enough healthcare workers, there aren't enough people in lots of different industries, and it's because the education system is so bad. There's a cultural problem where people don't finish Year 12 and they don't value learning how to do really simple things like read and write properly. I'm not one to preach. I really didn't like being at school. School kind of sucks, but you've got to go, because if you don't, the outcomes are so bad, and they're bad for everybody around you. Hobart deserves to have a co-ed public school close to the CBD, perhaps even in the CBD. There are places where one could be built. It's a problem that could be solved pretty simply, but it isn't. And instead we've got the situation where Everybody's wandering around, not knowing the difference between up and down. The school closed in the 1980s, but in 1967, on Black Tuesday, the kids were all sent home early. Smoke had filled the sky. As the kids poured out into the street, they looked up at the mountains above and saw the place engulfed, flames running on the wind. On the map is a mysterious place called the Brickfields. Its specifics are a mystery lost to time. It served as an open site for convict brick construction. It was also used to hold female convicts. It was an invalid persons depot, a place of shelter for the old, injured and insane former convicts. In 1921 it was purchased to build a sports field. Opening in 1922, the North Hobart Oval, it's hosted a variety of sports and other events. Primary function, however, has been to become the spiritual cradle of Aussie rules in Tasmania. North Hobart Oval hosted 3 Australian national football carnivals. The largest was in 1966. 92,347 tickets were sold. 2 decades earlier, at an earlier carnival, rain destroyed the surface. In the middle of the game, a dog escaped, running out onto the middle of the field with a piece of stolen food in its mouth. Digging up the grass, it buried the sausage in the mud, with intentions of saving it for later.